Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed the webinar last month. The title of today's webinar is Fit for the Future, Crisis-Proof Your Workplace Health Response. Pandemic planning expert David Hutcheson will discuss how to develop tailored exercises for 3 critical scenarios: a short-term localised outbreak, a medium-term epidemic, and a long-term pandemic. If you'd like to ask David any questions, please do so by typing in the question box on the control panel to the right of your screen. We'll go through all the questions at the end of the session. The session will last a maximum of an hour, and a recording of the webinar will be sent to you later this week. I think we are ready to begin now, so I'll hand you over to David.
That's great. Thank you very much. Morning, everybody, from a cold and wet Scotland, which is probably no surprise to any of you at this time of year if you've been up here. A little bit about this. Yes, as you heard, it's a follow-on from the one I did last month. But if you didn't see that, it's completely independent if it needs to be. Anybody who's been on the webinars I've done through BC Training in the past will know that what I tend to do is make the slides quite full. There's quite a lot on them, and that's deliberate because my idea is rather than you have to say a couple of lines and you have to scribble notes and then in 6 months' time you can't remember what I was talking about. I try to make the slide something that you can go back to in 6 months' time and think, yeah, okay, I've got all the information I need. So I don't tend to read through them, but I definitely don't read through them line by line. But hopefully in the future you'll be able to use it as a reference, and that's how I want this to be. It's to give you something that you can use once the exercise is gone. So I guess the starting point is, of course, the pandemic has been declared over. As a year ago, is it? Probably a wee bit more, that the WHO said that COVID is now endemic, which, if you don't know the word, means that it's just normal. It's just another illness. It doesn't get any special place in medical treatment. There are vaccines and so on, but endemic really just means it's just another one that you accept. But the thing about it is that, yes, we've had the pandemic, and I'll come to more about that, obviously, in this, but illness happens all the time. Any organization, these are figures that I picked up, nearly, 5.5, 6 days per person per year. Some organizations more or less, I know that. And that's just for ordinary things, colds, flu, COVID as it is now, personal things and mental health. All of these things mean that there is a base level of absence in any organization. No matter what you do, things happen to people. You will always have a base level. So just keep that in mind, and I'll build that into any of the exercises, as you'll see. So the starting point, I guess, is if you're planning an exercise, and this, I know you'll be BC people, so I'm telling you things that you can I know all that, of course you do. But we run something like, on average, between 50 and 80 exercises a year. It depends what clients want. But always we start from the point of what's the objective of the exercise. Some might be simply because we've got to do it every year to prove that we do it. Yeah, fair enough. But there still has to be some objectives to running an exercise. So what's the purpose of doing it? And that way, I find that's the first question we always ask. And then you can design the scenario and the injects and so on from there. What's the scope? Of course, is it the whole organization, one office, one department, one team, whatever? And is it for most exercises at the moment that we're doing, and you're probably all the same, I would say at least 90% of exercises are something to do with cybersecurity, hacking, data breaches, all these sort of things. I'm sure you're all getting the same sort of thing, in which case the period is relatively short if you're doing it as an incident management one rather than a longer term one. So the difference with illness type ones, they tend to be longer in their duration. I mean, by how long the incident, if it existed, would last, which is harder to manage. So I'll talk about that. How long have you got? We sometimes get asked by folk, oh, can we do a half day or an all day exercise? And the answer is, well, yes, but uh, any of you who've been involved in real incidents will know that there's a sudden rush when it happens, whatever it is. And then things start to slow down and there's long gaps when actually not an awful lot is happening. So it's quite hard to mimic that because folk get bored. So I find a short, sharp exercise works. The things that you want to do always when you're doing training, when you're doing testing, or in a real incident, we always say it's the same thing. People first. Don't break the law because you're not allowed to break the law. Communicate and then do business continuity. So all of that's built in, and don't be too clever. Sometimes we help out at exercises, and they're a bit like Shakespearean productions, and the exercise is more important than the objective. So I tend to think get it short, sharp, and clear, and get them to do it. So I'm sure you probably author, yeah, we know all that, and that's fine if you do, but that's just the kind of how we set up an exercise. So the first exercise that we'll talk about is the short-term absence. And a good one to pick for that, if you want to look for an illness, is the norovirus. It's a cracker. And it's not as easy to do these days as it used to be. Pre-pandemic, when most folk were in the office, it was very easy to kind of justify why everybody or a large proportion of people could be ill together. Now that we have working from home, staggered working, all the different ways of it, there's less face-to-face contact. So it tends to be, you have to work a wee bit harder to find a scenario to go with it. But I'll show you how to do that. But norovirus is a good one if you want to do something short and sharp, because it's very unpleasant. It happens quickly, as you can see. It's 24 to 48 hours. It can even happen in 12 hours. It's suddenly happens. It's highly infectious, people to people, and it's spread through all sort of ways. And the symptoms, as you can see, pretty unpleasant. I won't go over them in great detail, but it's not, unless possibly somebody had really severe underlying issues. It tends not to be fatal. It's very rare that it is, and almost always doesn't really need medical assistance, again, unless you are severely affected. So we're not overplaying it. This is something that happens very quickly, that doesn't give you a kind of issues about dealing with fatalities and these things, because they're a whole different world to deal with. But that norovirus, you see it a lot. It's the kind of thing that you see on cruise ships and all these sort of, where people gather. If it gets into a group, it spreads through the group very quickly. So a way to put a scenario together for that. The first thing, since we're not all in the office anymore, I mean, we almost never really get together unless we're on a client site. You have a company away day. It's catered, and you do all the role playing stuff and all of the things that people hate, all that kind of stuff that goes on at an away day, or even, I don't know, you have a team night out, you have a leaving do, you have anything that gets a number of people together at the same time for a period of time interacting. So that's day -1. That's your setup. Then you get the first few reports of people sick. they've been ill. They probably initially think it was food poisoning because there are some symptoms the same. Some in the office are being sick, some at home are being sick. So that you've set the scenario, that's your first inject, or your second inject, I suppose. Day zero, it's now happening. You're starting to get absences. Almost certainly it looks like it was tied back to the whatever event you had. Again, a way to just strengthen it a little is you could maybe pick specific teams that have got a fairly short RTO. Maybe the help desk, maybe a contact center, maybe payroll if you're near payroll time, all these sort of things. So looking at advance and just trying to pick something or one or two areas that are going to be a bit more affected than others, just to put the pressure on. And in that first day of it, day zero, maybe pick a number, but say 15% are off, but really focusing on critical areas. Then it starts to develop. So, you give your incident management team or whoever it is a chance to discuss that. It's not clear yet what the problem is. It probably will be they'll quickly relate it to the event. It could be food poisoning, it could be anything, it doesn't actually matter because the illness is not going to make a big difference here. But then you start to see it very quickly jump. Suddenly it's gone up to 30% by day 2 or 3, and that's because there's such a short period. The first are 12 hours, 24 to 48 hours, the number are really growing. But the original 15% are still ill because it's going to take you a number of days to get better. You're not better immediately. So you're now hitting quite serious numbers, and especially in critical departments. If you're now looking to get some injects, how about some social media comments? The staff are saying things like, they had us all together for this event and now we've all had food poisoning and we're all off sick. And then you start building in the negative stuff. So what, they don't care about us. They just tell us to carry on, all the things that are not true, but people say. So if you remember the first thing, people first. So is your incident management team looking at this as a people issue or a business issue? If the first thing they talk about is, well, we need to get the RTO and fix, we need to go to the right departments, that's lovely, and that's business continuity, and that's got its place. But what about the people who are sick? Who's contacting them? What are you doing about them? Are you making any ways of communicating, which are not as easy now that people are working from home? So yes, the first thing, people first. You're not breaking the law because you didn't cause it. But now we're on to communications. How are you actually communicating people, and what are you going to communicate? Do you just say, well, if you're sick, phone in? Really? Well, so you can really drive the people element of this, of how would you manage a lot of people unwell in a short period of time? And part of the objective I would set, the first is obviously, an objective to see how the organization would manage with large scale absence. Great. Yeah, that's a sensible objective. Looking at the business continuity plan, the recovery time objectives, again, do they look at those? Excuse me, I'll have a quick drink of water. Does anybody actually bring the business continuity plan to a scenario exercise? That's quite a good first testing point. Does anybody look to see which are the key departments and should anything be done about that? So you've got a number of things that you can be looking at to see what's going on. Then you get the social media element. And I know almost everybody has in their contract of employment, you must not talk to the media. Great. Yeah, that's really useful, and I'm sure it means well. The problem is that these days with social media, folk don't think they're talking to the media. They're sending messages to their friends, they're posting things to friends on any of the social medias that you use. And people pick that up. Unless you have got a very private group, if you use social media, somebody somewhere is going to post something that you don't want to happen. So you, as the person writing the scenario, build that in. And if some of your incident management teams, oh, we've got rules that say that nobody should do that. Fine. Well, somebody just has. So what are you going to do about them? Are you going to discipline them? Do you know who they are? Because they might be posting and not under their own name in any way. So are you going to spend time tracing them? Are you going to respond to that? Now, always, I'm not a great user of social media, as any of you who follow me knows, but I would say, don't get into a social media argument. You're going to lose, because then you get all the folk who have no purpose behind it, just waste time. They get in there and then suddenly you're spending all your time arguing. So again, what do you do? Do you contact the person? How do you find out who it is? Do you ignore it? So as a scenario, it's easy to build in something like that. Then you could maybe build in a bit in the local, a local newspaper that your company has got a lot of people off sick, and staff are making complaints about the fact that they're not being looked after. So you've now got a scenario where you've got ill people, you've got departments who are not able to cope, and you've got a media issue. So you've got three strands to your scenario that you can follow. And that is quite a good way to do it, because that means that at any time you can feed one in more than the other, depending on who your people are or what they're like. Other things like healthy staff won't come to the office because they're scared of catching it. So any department that needs to be in the office is now even shorter staff, because folk are saying, well, you're not going to ask me to come in when nearly half the staff are off sick. If I catch it, I can't look after my kids. I've got some underlying health issues. I'm not coming in. So you've got that, and then the media interest will grow. So you've now got a scenario there that's got a number of strands to it on an unpleasant, but not kind of terrifying issue, if you like. So you're now you're getting to the point that you have a number of things that you can feed into it. Going forward, by day 3, it's more than likely it's peaking in terms of your own staff absence, but you could be up to any percentage. You just pick a number. I mean, who could argue about, folks, it couldn't get as high as 50%. Well, it could, and it has. Some staff are recovering, but again, you've got the people first issue. They're not being sick or whatever else they've had, but they're still not feeling well. Are you going to ask them to come back to work? How are you going to ask them to come back to work? Maybe you can work from home, but is that how you want to be seen? How will that look? We're really short now with everything that's happened. I know you were a bit ill, but can you just do a few hours? But how does that come across? So that there's issues there about how the company are viewed. You've got your key areas that are short of people. It's now in the media, and you're being criticised for poor staff care. Whether you are or not is not the point. When we're doing a scenario, we want to try to push them, the recipients of the scenario, I suppose you could say, in a way that bad things happen. If everything is sweetness and light, then actually there's no point in doing it anyway, because it'll all be okay. This is the whole purpose, is to think of things that could be awkward, not trying to make it impossibly difficult, not kind of aliens landing type scenarios. It's very important that the scenario is believable, and that's why using some of this, doing research, you've got the symptoms, you've got the gestation period, all the rest of it. So you've got facts that you're presenting as the scenario. So the folk doing it don't have a chance to say, oh, that couldn't happen. And again, I mean, when we're doing a scenario, one of the first things we always do as an introduction is to say, please stick with the scenario. Don't say, oh, that couldn't happen on a Monday because only these things happen on a Tuesday. Just ask them to go along with it. And by and large, people do. They know the purpose. But get your facts right. Get these sort of things that are in here are exactly what the medical professions say about it. You've got it into the media. It's in social media. And also you're starting to see morale issues across the company. They're saying it was your fault. What kind of care was taken? It was catered, but did you check that the caterers have got good response? All these things. You wouldn't be doing that in advance, but now you have to justify what has happened. So in terms of injects, what are you doing about kind of reputational management? You're starting to get people back. They're not feeling great. So how are you managing them being reintegrated back into the workforce? Are you letting them work part-time? You're struggling because your key facility, your key activities are struggling. You want them back, but can you pressurize them? What are you doing about these key functions that are running below standard? And what are you doing about the comms? So you've still got your three legs of the stool that you can drive down, and at any point you can add bits to it quite easily to make it more difficult, if you like, for the whole team to manage it. And as I say, the key things, was the BCP used? I don't know how many exercises we run where the BCP isn't even mentioned. Considering what we do, and it's a business continuity exercise, you don't see it. I did do one for a firm in London last month. And for the first time ever, I think everybody turned up with a copy of the plan. Wanted to give them a wee medal for doing that. But, it sounded out, did MD use it? Once you've got your incident management team, crisis management team there, as it starts to develop, just pick on some of them and say, you were there, you're off sick now. You can't take part. Sit back. You're sick. You're too ill. So you can't play. So suddenly your incident management team is getting short people. And I've even seen it done that, you put yes or no on bits of paper and somebody pulls it out, and if it's yes, they're sick. You can do it as randomly as that, or you can pick people. But the good thing about it, doing that, is that means your incident management team need to reform, if you like, as they start to lose people. Because unless it was a strange kind of corporate event, there's no reason why members of the incident management team won't have been at it and won't be taken sick too. So add that in. people first, of course, was that done. And the comms we're talking about. What sort of health and safety protocols are being implemented? People are coming into the office and they're being sick in the office, without drawing too many pictures again for you there. But you can imagine people come in, they were feeling okay. This comes on very quickly. Suddenly, they're not well. What do you do about that? How do you deal with it? And the other things like cross-skilling and how do you return work. But that gives you a short, sharp scenario that you can do it in an hour. It doesn't have to be a long event. But it just means it actually is a good test of your incident management team, because you can pick them off. You can just take them out and say, sorry, you're sick now, you can't play. And we had one client did that, and the person that we were reporting to, they said they would pick who's off sick. And they obviously knew the people better than us, and they really gave their incident management team a hard time by picking key people and taking them out. Have you got a deputy? Well, phone the deputy. So there's a lot of things to think about there, but you can do quite a lot to make that a kind of a short, sharp, but difficult exercise. So moving on to the next level of exercise, a medium term. And the one that I like for this is measles. Now, a lot of you think, really? That was something that children used to get and virtually it's disappeared. Well, it's coming back. If you read a lot, especially in America for a number of reasons there I won't go into, but measles is definitely coming back. People are not having the same number of vaccine children that used to happen. Herd immunity is quite high. You need to have that, as you see, 95% for herd immunity for measles. We're dipping below that. Certainly in America, we're dipping below that. So measles is actually the current highest risk disease that's going around, more so than COVID, because measles generally it affects young people much more than it affects older people. It can be fatal quite regularly, unfortunately. No, that sounds like you die more than once. No, but you know what I mean. It can be a fatal disease. When I was young, and I'm ancient, I've had measles, and it was just something you got, and yes, people were ill, but it's coming back. So the thing about using a disease like measles, when you do a bit of research, and if you read about it on the WHO, you will see it is a major risk at the moment. I'm not going to try and pronounce what the virus is. I did it for a talk I did for the BCI and had 3 attempts and eventually had to give up. It's very easy to spread, and it's very much a risk to young people. So measles is a good one to pick. Good being in our terms, that it's bad for everybody else, but for us it's good. So that you can show a lot about it. There's a lot going on at the moment about cures being peddled, which are simply not going to work. There's a lot of distrust of science and experts these days, which are all of these things. And going back to the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine that allegedly caused autism. Not a debate that I want to get into, but anyway, that fed by conspiracy theories has meant less and less people are taking vaccines for it. And the media, and this is something I took from the Daily Mail, a frightening map reveals US counties. Well, apart from the fact that grammatically it's nonsense, because the map isn't frightening, it's actually the illnesses where they were was frightening, but leaving that aside, you know, the media will jump on anything like this. And so you've got quite a lot of media stuff that you can pull into an exercise. So the thing about measles, when you want to do a scenario exercise, something that lasts weeks rather than days, as it did with norovirus, timescales are longer. The key thing about it is measles, because it affects largely children, it's often the people who are sick are the children. But parents can't carry on working. Schools have been shut, nurseries shut, got a lot of sick children. So there's a lot of worry develops. There's also societal issues around it rather than company issues. So, the media will feed this stuff. So as a background problem, there's plenty of information you can gather and use on measles as an illness. At first, folk will probably say, oh, yeah, if they're kind of my age, I had measles when I was wee, there's nothing to it. Well, it is pretty unpleasant, to be honest. It's not nice at all. But also, it's a different world, and if people can't work at home because their child is sick, and schools are shutting and folk want to come to work but can't because there's no schools or nurseries, suddenly you've got absences building up. So the first stage really is, if the first few injects are that there's some local news reports that there's been a measles epidemic in your area. And this is an epidemic rather than a pandemic. An epidemic being something that's confined to a local area. Pandemic means certainly a number of countries and possibly worldwide it could be. But anyway, so this is an epidemic, it's closer. You can feed in that there's public health advisories coming out. It's easy to mimic these things, create them in Word and just stick them up on a PowerPoint or however you do it. There's needs for self-isolation. There's a whole lot of things that are starting to close. Schools are closing. And this is building quite rapidly. So this is the opening scenario for you, that maybe there's none, nobody has reported a case yet, but it looks like something's developing. So as an incident management team, crisis management team, what actions will you take? You've got a chance to think about it. So unlike norovirus, where suddenly people were being sick overnight, it was on you. This is a growing scenario. There's clearly a problem coming. What steps are being taken as an incident management team to look at what's coming, and what are you going to do about it? So, this is slightly different. This isn't immediately, there's a crisis, let's get stuck into it, let's solve things, let's be some sort of superhero. It's coming. It looks like it's coming. What are you doing about it? Anything? Nothing? Do you put out any communications? Do you ask people to report things? Maybe not. But your opening scenario is really how would we plan for something that's coming in the area? Then it grows. I jumped ahead. What are we doing? One of the things you could think is, what are the company's demographics? If you've got an organization that is largely kind of the groups that would have children at school, young children especially, primary age, but at school in any way, you're probably more at risk. If it's mostly young people you employ, they may not be vaccinated, so it may reach them. If it's old folk like me, we're probably all right. But Do you look at your demographics? Do you do you ask vaccine statuses? I doubt if you can do that, to be honest. Is that a GDPR issue? Or would folk answer it even if you asked them? But these are the sort of discussions you can prompt. Should we ask if there are unvaccinated people? Should we check to see how many young children they've got? So your incident management team should be thinking about, should we ask these questions? We can't ask that one. We can ask that one, but how do we phrase it in such a way? Do you put out a kind of corporate thing that we're aware that there's a measles outbreak in the area? Here are some of the steps we're taking. Is there anything we can do to help? So how is your incident management team preparing for it? Rather than, putting their underpants over their trousers and being a superhero and leaping into action. This is about sensible planning. And often incident management teams, the scenarios are bang, it's happened, deal with it. And people get stuck in and they make big decisions. This is more about business as usual type decisions, almost in a way. You've got a bit of time, you can pick it, you can think about it, you can move on. So what do? Then the cases start, and it's kind of a bit the same, key staff are off, you can do that. Schools are now shut, more and more people being off. They're off because, not that they're ill, but because their children are ill. What do you do? Do you ask them to take holiday, sick leave when they're not sick at all? All these kind of questions you can be throwing into, what about the people? What's happening with people? What are you telling people? What advice are you giving people? Any? None at all? But you can see an increase in absenteeism. What are you doing about that? Is it genuine? Is it not? You can also, if you're dependent on supply chains, and that could be just things like, it could be deliveries, but it could also be cleaners. It could be the company who supports your IT. Any of these are now struggling to be available. What are you doing about it? What do you do about the fact that if your children have got symptoms, and you're due to come to work, do you come? Do you not come? What are you doing about them when they come? And then you've got, decisions like, should we actually shut while this is going on? Would that be better or would it be worse? So there's a lot of things you can feed in there. Again, about decisions, people are it's back to the same as the norovirus. You're now starting the RTOs, all the rest of these sort of things. But you've got the complication of people are not ill but can't come to work. All these sort of things. What's the plan for dealing with that? And then afterwards, how do you get back to business as usual? So if somebody had to take time off because their child was sick, your rules probably allow that, maybe. But what if you've got temporary or contract staff? Do they not get paid? How does that look if, well, I know there's an epidemic in the area. I know it's tough, but hey, we're not going to pay you if you're off. That's how to really help with staff morale. So you can say that some contract staff are saying they're not coming back because of how they've been treated, and they just walk on you. So you've now got shortage of staff to deal with. How did you communicate? What did you tell customers? Because if you've got an epidemic, it's in your area, say, in, I don't know, in Newcastle, in London, and London's probably a bit big, an area of London, in Plymouth, in Edinburgh, it doesn't matter. But a customer 400 miles away isn't suffering it, but they're suffering the fact that you're not supplying them, either the goods or services. So what are you telling them? Is it a case of just saying, sorry, there's nothing we can do? And they say, yeah, that's fine, but there's something we can do. We can go to somebody else. They thought you had a business continuity plan for this. Do you? So there's a lot of things you can build in there. And then I'm always wary about fatalities. We really don't like putting fatalities into scenarios. If you feel you can do it, yes. I mean, the thing about fatalities, first of all, if it was anything that happened at work, that will be possibly a police matter, health and safety. You can build those in. Making it a fatality kind of takes it to a level that I'm wary of, but you can be very ill. But if you do put that in, what about funeral attendants? It may sadly be a child, not the person themselves, but one of their children. Do you get time off for funerals? What do you put out as a communication for that? And that's possibly something to consider. You may have had that with the pandemic, sadly. But how do you word that? When do you put it out? And how is it managed? And what are you going to do to the office? Anything? Is there anything necessary to bring people back? Do you feel that you need to have a special clean like we did do with pandemic? So that's a longer term scenario. That gives you anywhere between 10, 12, 14 days of a scenario. Still running in a short period of time, obviously, but you can move things forward, building up, and then how do you, and it's worth always remembering, test how you get back to business as usual. So that's the medium term one. And then, of course, the one that we all know all about, long-term absence. Well, what can we say? As if there would ever be a pandemic, eh? No, I can't imagine such a thing happening. We all know, we've all been through it. There's going to be another one. And I'm not scaremongering. They've been happening as long as human beings have existed in different formats. They will happen again. What will they be like? As bad as COVID? Possibly, possibly not. 2009 was no big deal. We spent a lot of time getting ready for that, and then pretty much it came to nothing. But H5N1 is the one that most folk have heard of, so I would tend to pick that one if you're going to do a scenario, just because folk have heard of it. Whether it would be the most likely one, it's kind of irrelevant, but just keeping it as something that you can use. So you go through pretty much what we did with pandemic, but the same sort of idea. H5N1, it's developing the way that you would expect. It's got all the symptoms that you don't like, all those things there, very unpleasant. It develops relatively quickly. That's really where we're looking at something that's going to run for a long time, months, possibly into years. So what has happened? What's your scenario? Highly pathogenic. I spend all my time doing pandemic stuff and then I can't pronounce half the words, but it just means that it's easily spread. H5N1, go for that because most folk hear about that one. It now produces, the latest variant has got strong human-to-human transmission and has a high mortality rate. So that gives you, that's your setup. That's where it's going to be. The WHO have declared that it's now the biggest risk to the world. The mortality rates are concerningly high, and the ability to spread to humans does not need an animal intervention. So most of these, when you see things about people who've got bird flu and that at the moment, when you dig into the story, you find that they work and live very close to fowl. This has now moved on to it can do human to human. So if you're doing a scenario, it's worth following roughly the World Health Organization phases. I mean, I've truncated it a bit here just to make it easier. You can use that. So phase one, as I say, that's it. Identified, it's working. Oseltamivir, Tamiflu sort of works, but is partially resistant. You will also find in most countries that stocks of Tamiflu have now passed their sell-by date. So although we had huge stocks, those stocks probably are not as good as they were. And do you want to put an injection into somebody with an antiviral that's out of date? So there's a risk there, so you can add that into it. The next thing is that there's clear human-to-human community transmission in your area. Easy to build up media stuff, schools are shutting, much of what we saw with COVID. Then you move on to what you saw through COVID, and I'm not going to go through that because we've all seen all that kind of information. You can rework it. H5N1 would not be hugely different. The government decisions, lockdowns, these sort of things, make your own choice in many ways. I mean, the lockdowns, would they do it again? I'm not sure that they would do as many, and maybe you could put one in. You could maybe say that the government have decided that the risk is less to let people mix. Go whichever way you will cause the most problem. And then obviously, how do you get back to business as usual? Business as usual. And you've been through this stuff with pandemic, so I won't spend long on it. So there are the factors to build in, all the stuff you've seen, all the stuff that we've been through. Now, what I've got on here is a template. I think some of you asked last time. I did mention that we have a calculator we built based on NHS predictions for absence over a pandemic period. If anybody wants a copy of this, just let me know and I can send you. It's in a spreadsheet. So what you can do is put all sort of clinical infection rates, which is how many people are going to catch it over the period, into it. And it gives you, and you tell how many staff you've got, and you can see the level of absence. And much like we saw with the others, you'll see week 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the peak weeks. That's when the most people are off. And you can build into that 3% for people who are ill for other reasons. All the things that we said at the very first slide, any other reason, they've got a cold, they've hurt their arm, all these, so that there's normal absences will still exist and carry on at the same level, at least the same level. Then you can go up as well. So if anybody wants a spreadsheet, let me know. So this is something you can put up to say we've got X number of staff. This is how many we expect to be off. And staff category, you can make those the key areas if you want. So you can show where key people will be off in key teams. So that's quite a good way to let people see what's coming and know when it peaks. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm happy to share that with you. It doesn't give me any grief. So week 1, growing cases, human to human, all the stuff you would expect. Nothing much there. Here are some of the things, and again, I'm not going to go through them in a lot of detail because you'll have been through most of it. What's your strategy? Did it work when you had COVID? Does it still hold? Did you update your plan after COVID? An awful lot of people got through COVID, had a pandemic plan or a business continuity plan, and didn't revisit it. Has that been done? So the mistakes you made last time, you're going to make again, to be honest, because it's not been addressed. I know we're a wee bit tight on time, so I'll go through these because you will have seen them before, and there's a lot of detail there about how to do it. So how's it spreading? Caring for sick family members, government tighten measures, you can build up on that. And then I've given you a list of things that you can put in to discuss. So, do you keep contractors on? Do you pay them? A lot of these you will have addressed, but did it work? So before you do it, look at where it didn't work. If you did a post-incident report on your pandemics, go through that and lessons learned, room for improvement areas, these sort of things. Take all of those. Now's your chance to build these in. And I've got lots of stuff there that questions you can ask as you go through it. Then we get up into the full scale. So you saw on the spreadsheet, this is when it really hits. So you're now really struggling, so is everybody else, so the health service. What's going on? And here are the things to look at for that. You're at the peak, things are failing. IT systems go down, but you've got nobody to fix it. Money is getting tight. If you're in a commercial organization, are you going to start laying stuff off? Are you not? Will you pay them? Can you pay them? Can you not pay them? All these sort of questions, you've now got things that you can build into the scenario and test it to see if you've got what will work for you. And then, how do you come back? What do you do about people coming back to work? And again, you'll have been through this. What's your cleaning regime would be? How do you build confidence that it's safe to come back? How do you just show that you did well? And part of it is what do organizations say about how they did? I'm not saying, hey, send out a message to everybody who says, really, weren't we clever? We did better than everybody else. Well, if you did, then fair enough. Good luck to you. You be one of the few, but that make it part of the scenario is how do you rebuild morale? How do you rebuild confidence? How do you make people feel that they were cared for? Were they cared for? Did you see that throughout the scenario? People first. Don't break the law, whatever laws you decide the government implement. And communicate. Did you? How? What was said? Get them to write some of these things. Because quite often when you have a scenario exercise, I don't know if you've seen it, but if comms people there, they'll say, yeah, we can do that. We'll write that. But they don't write it at the scenario. And I quite like to make them write it because that way you know what they're going to say and the proof that they can do it. I'm sure they can, but it's quite a good technique just to make it happen, because then the IMT, the lead, has got to pick up on that as part of her or his process that they're managing. So, get them to do it. Customers want to come back, some not happy because you let them down, some have disappeared altogether, owing you money possibly, more than likely. All these things you can build in to try and make the story hold together. So I know we've gone through that quickly, but there's a lot of information there and you've been through it before. So hopefully you can just lift that if you want to run that kind of scenario. And more of the stuff there. So the other thing I've got is here are some resources that you can go to for information, places that you can get some of the background I've put in here, and you'll see at the bottom the is it still called the Daily Telegraph? The Telegraph in the UK. I know people dismiss it a little because it's kind of, it's called the Tory graph in the UK, and it's very much, politically that's where it sits. But I have to say, the Telegraph Health Bulletin is the best mainstream media health bulletin you can get. It doesn't have the politics in it by and large, but it has some really good information that you're not easily finding anywhere else. So if you can sign up to that, I would, because I think it's extremely good at giving you background information about things that are happening. And it's not just because they interviewed me either. So when you get the presentation, there's some good resources to go to. If you're looking for anything specific, get in touch. I've got mountains of information about all sort of stuff, disease related, and all sort of other scenarios as well that I'm happy to chat to people about. So, I've got no issue if somebody dropped me an email saying, but what about that? What if we did that? Yeah, I'll do my best to help out and give you a chat about it. And if you want a copy of the spreadsheet, just let me know. And that's really all I want to cover at this stage.
Thank you very much, David. I think we do just have one quick question about waves from Chris.
Yeah, let's
You
see if
should
I
be
can
able to just, yeah.
see it. I'll get the chat up. Um,
If you just, it's just the up at the top next to the person there. If you just go to the
mhm.
next box along to the right,
Yeah, I've got that, but it's
there's
just
the if you go to the top where the little person is, and then there's the bit that says chat just above there on the right. If you click on the next one,
yeah.
there's a question tab. That's it.
Question time. Oops, I've got no questions yet.
Oh,
Okay.
hang
If you
on,
wouldn't
let
mind
me.
using it, I'll do my best. And I'm sorry, I'll look like I'm sort of ghost appearing and disappearing. Here we go. Waves, yeah. Is it likely to be linear? No, it's not. It it will come in waves. Generally, 3 waves is what we've always assumed it would be. But within the wave, the it's a bit more linear within the wave. So you can kind of assume 3 waves, roughly speaking, and roughly what the spreadsheet showed within the wave how it would be. So it does peak. The the first one tends to be the one that causes panic because we don't know enough about it. The second one is because things are developing very quickly. And then the third one, it's we're starting to get used to it. So 3 waves I would allow for. Uh, if anybody wants a spreadsheet, drop me an email and I'll send it on to you. The Yeah, measles. Hi, Chris. Measles has declined rapidly, sadly, and Chris is somebody definitely to follow if you want some information. I go to her as well, so she's
That's
very
brilliant.
useful.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to everybody who attended and has asked questions and listened. Like we said before, you'll get a recording of the webinar later this week. And if you've got any feedback, please get in touch with us. And those who've requested a copy of the spreadsheet, we'll make sure you get that. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, David.
Thanks, folks.
See you
Take care.
later. Bye.